I wanted to make a quick little video, kind of going through the highlights of doing the U-joints on the wheel side U-joints on a 94 Ram 2500 with the Dana 60. So start off with, you're going to want to pull your hubcap off. Next thing, I would get a jack under there with some jack stands. At this point, I haven't put jack stands under it yet because I still have the wheel on. But that would be what you would do next. After that, you're going to want to pull the cotter pin out of the axle nut. Pair of needle nose works good. And then I would next get the axle nut loose. It's actually kind of a weird size. An 11, you want an 11.1 and 11/16 inch socket. I got mine at AutoZone with a 3/4 inch ratchet, and then to get enough pressure I used like a 3-foot piece of pipe. And then next we're going to pull the lug nuts off and the tire. Got the tire off. The wheel studs, wheel nuts are 24 millimeter, or at least they were on mine. So at this point we are going to next pull this bolt and this bolt right in here off, holding the caliper on. Okay, and I forgot to mention, it is a 3/8 inch hex key. I went with a socket because it's easier to get in there, and you have more options. But what you want to do is, here are the bolts. You can see they're pulled out, but they're actually a captive bolt. What you want to do is, you can see right down there how you can make sure that you get them far enough out. And if you do the same from the bottom, I won't show that on camera because it'd be hard to get that angle, but you can look up from the bottom and make sure that the bottom bolt is also clear of the, I think it'd be the knuckle, because otherwise you can beat on it till the cows come home and you won't get it off, even if it's loose. So you want to make sure those are pulled far enough out, and then take hammer, mallet, whatever, and preferably a mallet, and knock this off. It most likely will not just fall free. Okay, so we got the caliper off. You can sort of better see what I mean a little bit about those captive bolts. Let's see. Being in there, and then I just hang it right back here. Keeps it out of the way and keeps it from messing up your brake line. I end up just using an old scrap of 2x4 and a hammer because I didn't have a mallet handy, and it's really not good to just, use a regular framing hammer like I have handy. So just 2x4 works good to convert a framing hammer into a mallet. And then at this point, you are going to take, it's kind of hard to see in there. Let's see if I can get the camera to focus where I want it. Okay, right down. You can kind of see it down there. There is a 12 point, and I will check the size of it and tell you. There are 4 of them. Maybe this side would be easier. Yeah, there we go. There's one right there. One right there. And then one on each side here. You can see the top one, and the bottom one doesn't want to focus. We need to go ahead and pull those out. I would start off using a breaker bar. I busted a ratchet on the other side, so I'm going to start off with a breaker bar on this side. Okay, we got all 4 of the bolts holding the wheel bearing assembly on. We got all 4 of them off, and that is actually a 12.9/16. And these bolts are 12-point bolts, so no getting by with the 6-point. The axle nut that I mentioned was 12-point. That is a 6-point. And I have not verified this myself, but from reading on a lot of forums, most guys say that for whatever reason, a 6-point, what is it say? 1 and 11/16. Some guys say that the 6-point won't work, and so getting the 12-point though does. So I have not verified that myself, but at this point you're going to take the axle nut the rest of the way off. And next you have a few options, because at this point it is time to get the rotor and wheel bearing assembly, or hub unit, whatever you want to call it, off. And at this point you've got a few options for that. On the driver's side, I used basically a gear puller to pull it off, but I actually ended up, that separated my wheel bearing assembly. I would really like to reuse the wheel bearing assembly on this side because I need the truck up and running again. So for this side, I am going to try doing it a little bit differently. One option would be to find like a piece of metal or wood or something that I could run from here and put up against the back of my rotor, and then start the truck and try to get the power steering to actually push it off. I may end up trying that. First though, I am going to, at this point, actually put my wheel back on, lower this side of the truck onto the ground, and then try wiggling the wheels, or it'll only have one wheel on, but the wheel back and forth. Some people say that'll break it free and be less strain on it than using a gear puller, hub puller, whatever you want to call it. So that's what we're going to try, and I will let you know if that works. We got both sides popped off. I tried putting it down, putting the tire back on and wiggling it on the ground. That did not work. But I had a piece of 1-inch pipe coupling, and what I did was, let me get a flashlight. What I did, we've got axle grease running out, so what I did was I put that in between that and turn the wheel. And well, it was actually, I'm doing a bad job explaining this. In between that and that with this, and turn the wheel, and that sort of spaced it out. I'll try to put a picture in there that is way better than me trying to explain it. Okay, so the next step in here is, and let me try to re-explain it before I move on. This piece right here, you want to put the spacer between that and this part of the, I don't know, basically the C right here. I don't know the technical term for it. And put the spacer in between there, and then turn the wheels. And then I also did it on the front here too, on this side. So maybe that will make more sense. And again, just used a 1-inch pipe fitting. For this next part, we're going to go ahead and slide the axle out, the axle shaft out of the axle shaft housing. For that, we want to have an old rag, I'm using a glove, that's trash, to hold the axle shaft up, because you do not want to drag it, and especially the splines, across the inner seal there. So we'll go ahead and do that. All right, we got the axle shaft out. I don't know if I can get the camera to focus in there. Let's see if I can. Doesn't look like it's going to cooperate with me on it. Oh, there we go. That seal in there is what you want to be careful of as you're pulling it out. You don't want the splines to drag across the bottom of it. Here we are with our passenger side axle shaft. What we're going to do at this point is make a mark, and a lot of people don't think this matters. I personally don't think it does, but at the same time, why not just be careful with this? We're going to make a mark from either here to here or here to here, either one. And that will just help us to get it back exactly how it was when we're putting it back together. Some people say that it can be imbalanced if you mismatch it and, say, flip it 180 and do that. I don't think it will be, but it takes a second to do, so why not? I ended up having to take the axle shafts over to a buddy's house to use his press and anvil and vise to be able to get those out. They were stuck in there pretty good. So unfortunately I don't have that part on video. There's lots of good videos though for just changing U-joints. These have the internal retainer clips, so you can sort of maybe see it in there. I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but it's internal retainer clip for a U-joint, so nothing really different there. I went ahead and put axle grease on the inner axle shaft and splines, and then anti-seize on anywhere that will be contacting for the wheel hub bearing unit. And I also took a wire disc and ran over those surfaces, also on the truck side. Right here, everywhere basically that has anti-seize on it, you can see I ran over that also with a wire disc first, so, or wire wheel. So you want to get the rust off of there so that hopefully if you have to be back in here, it doesn't stick together as bad. So now we're going to go ahead and put the passenger side axle shaft back in. What you want to watch out for, and I'm going to see if I can get the camera to pick up on this, but I don't think I can, is all the way in there, maybe 2 inches from where the splines meet up, there's a seal. And you want to make sure that those splines don't run across that seal and tear it up, because on the passenger side, it's not too big of a deal to change. On the driver's side, it's a bear. So you want to hopefully not mess up those splines when you're either pulling the axle shafts out or putting them back in. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so we've got that in there. Before you go ahead and put your hub on, you're going to want to have something in there propping that up so it's not putting pressure on that seal. I just used an old glove that was trash, wedged in there nicely, and now we're going to make sure there's no gunk in these splines and put axle grease on them and then also on the splines on the hub, and then we'll be putting the hub back on and bolting that down. I got the 4 bolts holding the hub assembly put on, and I also went ahead and put that on. It still needs to tighten down, but I'll wait till I have the wheel on and it on the ground to torque that down. Getting these bolts in here on the back on was a little bit of a chore because you have this I guess it'd be kind of like a shield that has to line up with the holes on the back and the holes on the hub assembly, and because it's a bearing unit, it spins freely. So it took a couple times, and eventually I ended up kind of putting it on almost at an angle so I could feed it in while holding a bolt in the back to make sure I got it lined up correctly. And then now I'm going to go around to the other side and get to this point. First, though, I just wanted to show you the spacer shield thing is 2 pieces, and the little piece goes on the back if you got that mixed up. So this goes right to there, and then the larger piece on like sort of like that. I got caught up on the driver's side. At this point, I'm gonna change the brakes on here. You don't have to. If you want to, what you do is these 2 little stubs are going to be in your way when putting it on, or not stubs, the bolts. So you can take the ratchet and back them back, and with your thumb just kind of press them in. They will back out far enough. At that point, then I'm going to take a C-clamp and push the piston of the caliper piston back into the housing. Because these brake pads I'm just going to toss, I am actually going to leave them in there just to make a nice smooth surface. You don't have to, and typically I would just push off of the piston itself, but since I'm going to be chucking these anyway, it'll save me a little bit of time doing it that way. And then once I get that in, I'll show you how to take the pads out. This is how I have the caliper set up, using the brake pad as the push plate is not the correct way to do it, but I wanted to save some time. It's late and I want to get this truck back on the road. And these pads are not completely shot, but this truck, I use it to tow pretty heavy pretty much most of the time I'm driving it, so I figured it wouldn't be a bad idea to throw some towing brakes up there and hopefully increase its dismal stopping power. For pulling the brake shoes off, the one next to the piston just comes out of there. It's got 2 little retaining clips, so pretty easy to take that one off. This one you need to pull out from you. If I can't get it with my hand, I will grab a screwdriver and wedge the screwdriver under that and pull it off. So I'm guessing I will basically like that, but I'll need a second hand to do it. All right, the new brake shoes are on, so now we're ready to put this back together. It should just slide in. If you're having problems with it sliding on the way you took it off, come up here and right here. Those need to be flush or further out than the caliper housing. And sorry about the low video quality. It is dark and my phone has low battery, so the flash is not working. All right, got the caliper back on. I ended up having to pull it back off and push the piston a little bit further in. Hadn't pushed it far enough. So now what you're gonna do is, there is one stud there on the top and one on the bottom that you need to put back in. And so I don't like how this is wrapped around. I'm gonna pull that off and make it to where it's not all kinked up like that, because that's not supposed to look like that. But then at that point, we'll move on to the next step. We are going to go ahead and put the wheels back on, get her on the ground, and then we'll go ahead and tighten up the axle nuts on both sides and put the cotter pins through. I realized I never made a wrap-up video that night of finishing the job. It was dark and I was pretty cold and tired, so I just got the truck put back together and went inside. But the next day I ended up torquing down the axle nut, as well as the 4 bolts holding the wheel hub on. I'm not going to share the torque specs, they're readily available online, but I would find those from a source you trust. There's free downloads of the Chilton's manual and the service manual online for this truck, so those are good spots to get accurate torque specs from. But I ended up, if you have to put new wheel studs in your hub assembly like I did on one side because of needing a new hub assembly, make sure to torque that side down multiple times. I ended up having to torque it down about 6 times before they quit loosening up after 10 miles. So the first 100 miles I drove it, I was stopping every 10 miles and torquing them, and they were still moving. But after about 6 times, mine quit moving. Obviously, I'd do it a couple times after they quit moving, just to make sure. But that's about it. Overall, I would say it went better than I thought it might, but it definitely took longer than I thought it would. So personally, I would rate this 2.5 out of 10 hardness, but totally something that the average mechanically inclined person can do. Thanks so much for watching. If you made it this far, I appreciate it, and if you'd like, please subscribe for more content like this.